Chapter 391. They attacked for a full 9 months but couldn't take it down. I heard quite a few powerful cultivators died, entering but never coming out. In the end, they had no choice but to return the tomb to the rightful owner. That time, the inherited antiquity pavilion suffered both loss of money and reputation. Some elderly cultivators also sighed. The value of this alchemist's tomb is quite ordinary. No major figure would come here, would they? Inside the valley, many cultivators gathered in small groups, discussing things before the official start time. Sima Longyun of the Rage Immortal Holy Nation is here. A cultivator looked up and pointed to a young powerhouse in the distance for the person next to him. It was a young, handsome man. He wore a set of golden armor. And the battle intent pressing down from his entire body gave him the aura of a savage bull capable of trampling mountains and rivers. He was bursting with spirit, and his golden armor made him look truly like a divine son. The outstanding disciple, Sima Longyun, of the Rage Immortal Holy Nation. Seeing this young man, even the older generation of cultivators felt a slight tremor in their hearts. At this moment, many cultivators in the valley, even the marquises of great sects and powerful kingdoms, greeted the young man one after another. This young man was immensely pleased with himself, as if bathed in sunlight. His demeanor was exceptional, the dragon among men everyone spoke of. Speaking of the Rage Immortal Holy Nation, many people felt a chill. The Rage Immortal Holy Nation was absolutely a great nation in the Eastern 100 cities, with an extremely long and ancient heritage. Although the Rage Immortal Holy Nation had not produced an immortal emperor, its founder was an immortal physique grand completion who was once invincible across the 9 heavens and 10 lands. It could be said he was on par with an immortal emperor. The Rage Immortal Holy Nation is one of the very few kingdoms in the Eastern 100 cities and even the human emperor world that possesses an immortal physique technique. That year, the founder of the Rage Immortal Holy Nation achieved the grand completion of the Rage Immortal Tyrannical Physique, one of the 12 immortal physiques. He created the supreme immortal physique technique of the Rage Immortal Tyrannical Physique, known as the Overlord Immortal Physique Technique. It is this Overlord Immortal Physique technique that has created the foundation for the Rage Immortal Holy Nation to stand firm until today. I didn't expect this common tomb to attract Sima, the virtuous nephew. Seeing Sima Longyun, many cultivators greeted him, even the elderly ones, and the marquises of great sects were equally happy to associate with him. Here, Sima Longyun was like a fish in water, extremely popular. He was also completely full of himself. When others asked, he immediately laughed and said, "I heard the owner of this tomb was an extraordinary alchemist. I hope there are ancient medicinal herbs buried in his tomb. My golden savage bull physique has been achieved. My masters found an ancient formula for me to prepare a physique-enhancing paste, and I happen to be in need of a few specific ancient herbs. So, I'm here to see if I can find the ancient herbs I need. If I succeed, advancing to the tyrannical holy physique in the near future won't be an issue." Anyone hearing Sima Longyun's words knew he was boasting. But there was no alternative, he truly had the capital to boast. Therefore, upon hearing Sima Longyun's words, even the older generation of marquises secretly shuddered and quickly offered their congratulations. Sima Longyun greatly enjoyed this vanity of being revered by the stars. Although Sima Longyun was showing off, he was indeed a person of ability. He hailed from the Rage Immortal Holy Nation and was born with the Golden Savage Bull Physique. One must know that the Golden Savage Bull Physique is an innate physique within the lineage of the Rage Immortal Tyrannical Physique. It is also one of the 48 innate physiques. More importantly, the Rage Immortal Holy Nation possesses the Rage Immortal Tyrannical Physique Supreme Immortal Physique Technique, and with conditions like Sima Longyun's, he might very well be valued by the elders of the Rage Immortal Holy Nation and cultivate the Supreme Immortal Physique in the future. Therefore, Sima Longyun is considered to have limitless prospects. This time, if there are ancient herbs suitable for the ancient pill formula, no matter the price, what is not mine cannot be. Sima Longyun openly declared this in front of many people. This was not only a warning to others not to compete with him for the ancient herbs within but also a subtle boast. To put it bluntly, my family is the Rage Immortal Holy Nation. I am a talented marquis from the Rage Immortal Holy Nation. I've never lacked money. Those who know better shouldn't compete with me. Brother Sima is indeed a pillar of the Rage Immortal Holy Nation. If this ancient tomb truly holds the ancient herbs Brother Sima needs, I believe everyone would want to yield them to Brother Sima. Who would be so ignorant as to compete with Brother Sima? Wouldn't that be openly disregarding the Rage Immortal Holy Nation? Some disciples from other sects around Sima Longyun were flattering him. Regarding Sima Longyun's arrogant attitude, many people were actually unhappy in their hearts. But being unhappy didn't help. He truly had the capital to be arrogant, and the Rage Immortal Holy Nation was someone no one could afford to provoke. When Li Qiye and his group arrived at the small valley, the tomb breaking had not yet started, but the inherited antiquity pavilion's excavation had entered its final stage. At this point, a corner of the mausoleum buried deep underground was already exposed. As Li Qiye's group arrived at the tomb excavation site and saw the corner dug out in the valley, Xikong Toqian said to Li Qiye, "This tomb doesn't look large, does it? It shouldn't be an ancient tomb of the alchemist emperor level, at most, it's just an ancient tomb of a legendary alchemist." Xikong Toqian had transformed into an ordinary-looking young man. Anyone who looked at him would instantly forget him. However, this fellow didn't dare show his true appearance in such a crowded place. Just as Qi Xiaodia said, this rogue had committed too many despicable acts, and his enemies were scattered all across the eastern 100 cities. Li Qiye didn't say anything, squinting his eyes as he assessed the area. No one knew what he was thinking. With Li Qiye silent, Xikong Toqian certainly dared not speak carelessly. Although Xikong Toqian himself had an extraordinary background, he was usually reckless, yet he felt an immense reverence for the young boy in front of him, who was even younger than himself. Xikong Toqian had been in the world since he was young. What kind of trouble hadn't he stirred up? He even dared to enter the ancestral lands of great sects and kingdoms, and even dared to dig up the tombs of their founders. But strangely, after meeting Li Qiye, he was like a mouse seeing a cat, harboring immense apprehension towards Li Qiye in his heart. His instinct told him that the young man before him was definitely a terrifying figure, one who could even devour people whole without spitting out the bones. Provoking him would likely lead to a burial without a tomb. Xikong Toqian believed his instinct was correct. Walking underground, hiding in the shadows, deceiving and cheating. He had encountered countless dangers, and his instinct had saved him every single time. Underground, he had once encountered a supremely terrifying bad omen. That kind of feeling made his hair stand on end, but even that most feared bad omen's sense of danger was far less than what he felt when encountering Li Qiye. Compared to Xikong Toqian's joy at watching others get into trouble, Li Qiye showed no reaction at all. He just kept assessing the terrain. Furthermore, to him, a being of Sima Longyun's caliber was simply not worth his attention. Even though he knew Sima Longyun was talking to him, he couldn't be bothered to even glance at him. The unknown youngster dared to ignore his words. Sima Longyun's face immediately darkened, and his eyes turned cold. "This is my friend." Seeing Sima Longyun's change in expression, Qi Xiaodao immediately played the mediator. They were here for the rotten nether bean. Qi Xiaodao only hoped to obtain it smoothly and did not wish for complications, let alone provoke someone like Sima Longyun. "Is that so? This friend of Brother Qi seems a little too arrogant." Sima Longyun sneered. It was then that Li Qiye slowly turned around, glanced at Sima Longyun, and was about to speak. But before Li Qiye could open his mouth, a burst of immortal music rang out, like divine sound descending to the world, immediately stunning everyone in the valley. At that moment, divine flowers rained down, and it seemed as if a shower of flowers was falling from the sky. This caused everyone in the valley to involuntarily look up. This was not the strangest thing. Following the falling flowers, wave after wave of pleasant immortal music rang out. Next, maidens descended from the sky. As these maidens descended, clusters of ice flowers bloomed continuously. Under the feet of each maiden, an ice flower bloomed, lifting the descending maiden as she flew down. The maiden suddenly descending from The sky were all wearing feather robes and thin silk veils, truly like descending celestial maidens. The Ice Feather Palace is here too. Seeing the divine flowers blooming, whether they were marquises or cultivators of the older generation, their expressions involuntarily became solemn, and they murmured. The Ice Feather Palace is one of the most powerful inheritances in the Eastern 100 cities, an emperor's lineage Immortal Gate. The Ice Feather Palace was founded by the Ice Feather Immortal Emperor, established on a snow-capped peak. And the Ice Feather Immortal Emperor was one of the few female immortal emperors throughout the ages. Although the Ice Feather Palace did not, like other emperors' lineage inheritances, establish a kingdom and rule over a region. They established themselves on a snowy peak, high above, seeking to stay away from the hustle and bustle. But even though the Ice Feather Palace did not build a kingdom or unify a region, no one has ever dared to look down upon it. To this day, the Ice Feather Palace remains unfathomably deep, possessing an astonishing foundation. Looks like I'm not too late. At this moment, an extremely pleasant voice rang out. Next, several figures descended from the sky. When people saw the few people descending from the sky, they couldn't help but be astonished. The maidens descending from the sky were all breathtakingly beautiful, like blossoming lotus flowers on the water. So many beautiful maidens appearing simultaneously was truly a visual treat. And these beautiful maidens surrounded a young man. Wait, they surrounded a maiden in men's clothing. The maiden surrounded by these maidens was not inferior to the people beside her. She was even more attractively beautiful. This maiden had a pair of eyes like divine stars, bright and captivating, like the brightest star at night. Her skin was like frozen cream. Her lips red and teeth white, and her nose bridge high. In her anticipating eyes, her spirit soared. This was absolutely a city-toppling beauty. Yet, such a captivatingly beautiful maiden was dressed in men's clothing. Even the loose crescent-shaped men's attire on her body could not hide the jade peaks on her chest, which could be clearly seen peeking, adding a touch of allure. The beauty before them, a maiden in men's clothing, did not look awkward at all. On the contrary, it made people feel she was like gold and jade, with exceptional grace and charm, very delightful, possessing a quality that made hearts flutter. Wuxia. The moment he saw this beautiful maiden in men's clothing, even the arrogant Sima Longyun's expression changed instantly. He absolutely did not want to provoke such a person. Although the Rage Immortal Holy Nation was ancient and powerful, the Ice Feather Palace was even stronger, an emperor's lineage Immortal Gate. Always high above. The Ice Feather Immortal Emperor was once an invincible existence that even true gods feared. The successor of the Ice Feather Palace. Seeing this beautiful maiden in men's clothing, everyone present slightly shuddered. No one dared to mock her. Although the thought of a girl dressing as a man usually made people laugh, at this moment, no one dared to laugh at her. Ice Feather Palace. Seeing the beautiful maiden in men's clothing before him, Li Qiye couldn't help but squint his eyes, recalling a past event, the Ice Feather Immortal Emperor. Thinking of that matter, he couldn't help but reveal a smile. Upon seeing the successor of the Ice Feather Palace, Wuxia, everyone present felt their spirits solemnize, adopting cautious expressions to avoid Wuxia thinking they were mocking her. At this moment, Li Qiye could be said to be the only one smiling, which immediately drew Wuxia's attention. It seems it's not an alchemist emperor's tomb. Wuxia glanced at the tomb still being excavated and said with a smile. Her smile was exceptionally beautiful. She was originally a stunning beauty. Yet she insisted on wearing men's clothing. Her smile held 7 parts of feminine beauty and 3 parts of masculine handsomeness. Combined, the smile was uniquely beautiful and captivating. Even girls would sigh in admiration upon seeing it. At this moment, the female disciples of the Ice Feather Palace who followed Wuxia were already situated on an exquisite pavilion located on the highest ground at the scene. Although the pavilion was not large, it had everything: an ice brazier, tea set, soft bed, and comfortable cushions, everything one could need. Wuxia lay on the soft bed, truly relaxed and comfortable, in a lazy posture with an indescribable ease. The beautiful maidens around her served her. She chuckled, embracing one on the left and one on the right. truly embodying the image of a young master of darkness, a suave playboy. From time to time, she teased the beauties beside her, and bursts of joyful laughter spread out. It seemed as if she was not a girl but a peerlessly handsome young man, enjoying the blessings of beauties, embracing the left and right, with beauties serving her infinite pleasure. Seeing this absurd and fragrant scene left many cultivators silent. Some older generation cultivators perhaps sighed at the changing times, while some younger cultivators couldn't help but feel envious, thinking how fragrant it would be to be in their shoes, enjoying such beauty. Xianxia was clearly a girl, yet she acted like a suave young master, gentle as jade and exceptionally graceful. If she truly were a man, she could definitely charm countless girls to death. Xianxia's glamorous demeanor made men envious and also made girls sigh in admiration. Even girls would compliment her, "What a fine young master of darkness." Compared to Xianxia, Sima Longyun, who had just claimed to be exceptionally graceful and outstanding, was utterly rubbish. Xianxia before them, even though she was in men's clothing, was naturally graceful and gentle as jade, completely genuine and without a trace of pretense. Compared to Xianxia, if Sima Longyun's earlier grace was merely an act, the comparison made him seem repulsive and worthless. Xianxia's appearance completely stole Sima Longyun's thunder. Just moments ago, as a disciple of the Rage Immortal Holy Nation and a grand completion innate physique, he could be called young, talented, and handsome, drawing everyone's attention. Now that Xianxia appeared, she was the true dragon and phoenix. Sima Longyun was merely a mud dragon. Even though his thunder was stolen by Xianxia, Sima Longyun dared not utter a sound. Although he was a disciple of the Rage Immortal Holy Nation, he was still too far beneath Xianxia. Xianxia, however, was the successor of the Ice Feather Palace, high and mighty. With her status, she was someone anyone in the Eastern 100 cities would treat with apprehension. Moreover, the Ice Feather Palace, as an emperor's lineage immortal gate, was much more powerful than the Rage Immortal Holy Nation. Not to mention Sima Longyun, even the crown prince of their Rage Immortal Holy Nation personally coming would have to give Xianxia 3 parts of face. Xianxia was exclusively enjoying the pavilion, completely blessed with beauty. Li Qiye, seeing such a sight from the side, couldn't help but smile slightly. He couldn't help but think of the Ice Feather Immortal Emperor. After so many years, the Ice Feather Palace still hadn't changed this rhetoric. This little girl really wants to imitate the founder of her Ice Feather Palace. She even imitated the tone. He didn't know how much of that girl, the Ice Feather Immortal Emperor's skill she had learned. It's out, it's out. In the valley, not long after, the Inherited Antiquity Pavilion finally completely excavated the mausoleum buried deep underground. The ancient mausoleum, having gone through countless years, was built with divine stone, and the Tao rhythm flowed. Undoubtedly, this mausoleum had been blessed by a powerful figure. Even so, the mausoleum had been corroded by time, and the Tao rhythm had greatly weakened. At this moment, the experts of the Inherited Antiquity Pavilion lifted the entire mausoleum and placed it in the center of the valley. After tidying up, the auctioneer finally came out. Cough, esteemed fellow Taoists, this tomb belongs to a legendary alchemist from an ancient era. This alchemist came from a prestigious alchemic family. This tomb, after our Inherited Antiquity Pavilion's appraisal, is absolutely genuine. On this point, our Inherited Antiquity Pavilion dares to guarantee it with our million-year-old golden signboard. After the auctioneer stepped forward, he addressed the crowd. At this moment, all the cultivators in the valley looked at this mausoleum, their eyes gathered upon it. According to the rules of tomb breaking of our Inherited Antiquity Pavilion, this legendary alchemist-level mausoleum will first be auctioned off whole. If no one bids, the tomb will be opened for individual auction. The auctioneer looked at everyone present and said, "How much are you planning to sell this mausoleum for?" Hearing the auctioneer's words, a cultivator couldn't hold back and shouted loudly. Although this legendary alchemist-level mausoleum might not contain peerless, world-shaking techniques, nor might it have unparalleled treasures or weapons, it was very likely to hold precious ancient medicinal herbs. Many alchemists, when near death, would bury some precious spirit medicines and rare herbs with them. For many cultivators with specific needs, especially major figures. Above the marquis and true person level, ancient herbs appeared especially precious. Just like Sima Longyan, he needed ancient herbs to refine his physique. Although physique paste is suitable for refining all physiques, and its formula is commonly available to cultivators worldwide. However, high-grade physique paste, especially the ingredients for high-grade paste, are not easily found. Among them, the highest quality ones are even harder to come by. Physique paste can be called a universal physique paste, suitable for any physique. But there are also inherited kingdoms that have their own secret compounding formulas, or use ancient pill recipes to refine paste for specific physiques. It is precisely because many ancient pill recipes require ancient herbs that ancient herbs are so popular. Sima Longyan, for instance, was looking for ancient herbs to match his ancient formula to refine his golden savage bull physique. Seeing that the cultivators present were eager to try, the auctioneer cleared his throat and said seriously, "Precious ancient herbs, I believe I don't need to emphasize this too much. Aside from those that can only be found in ancient burial grounds, most can only be found underground. Good ancient herbs are welcomed everywhere. Our Inherited Antiquity Pavilion's appraisal of this mausoleum suggests there should be quite a few ancient herbs inside. Our Inherited Antiquity Pavilion has decided to start the bidding for this mausoleum at 900,000 Grand Sage crystal walls. 900,000 Grand Sage crystal walls." Upon hearing this, all the cultivators present burst into an uproar. 900,000 Grand Sage crystal walls, don't even mention rogue cultivators, even marquises from great sects could not afford that. Even a great sect or kingdom might not be able to instantly take out so many crystal walls. Even if they had that many crystal walls, they would have to consider whether it was worth it. "What a joke," a demon king said. "This is simply an astronomical price. This price could buy the highest grade Saint Physique paste, to exaggerate, it could even buy Immortal Physique paste. Who is willing to gamble 900,000 crystal walls to buy the tomb of a legendary alchemist?" These words were echoed by many major figures. A true person shook his head and said, 900,000 Grand Sage crystal walls. Even the lowest grade of Grand Sage crystal walls has enormous value. This is truly an astronomical price. If you were to change it to 900,000 Saint Venerable crystal walls, we might consider it. Even high-grade Saint Venerable crystal walls would be expensive. That's right. Others chimed in one after another. This price is too unreasonable. If it were the tomb of a Grand Sage, your Inherited Antiquity Pavilion asking for 900,000 Grand Sage crystal walls would be understandable, but for a legendary alchemist, this price is ridiculously high. Esteemed guests, everyone knows that the status of a legendary alchemist has always been very high, no less than that of a Grand Sage. Given the status of a legendary alchemist, it is worth this price. The auctioneer was not angered, smiling with a genial expression. This was the advantage of tomb breaking. If it were in an auction house, once the value of the auctioned item was fixed, bargaining was impossible. Tomb breaking, on the other hand, allowed for bargaining, and if you had the ability, you could drive the price down. That's only when he was alive. An alchemist also spoke. When a legendary alchemist was alive, his status being higher than a Grand Sage is understandable, but that's not necessarily the case after death. As an alchemist, the only things he might pass down are some ancient herbs. The auctioneer chuckled. This price is still acceptable. Who knows, perhaps there is a 9 transformation soul herb among the ancient herbs. Everyone knows that a 9 transformation soul herb buried for 1,000,000 years is truly extraordinary. If paired with an ancient destiny pill, it would absolutely be an invaluable treasure. For the older generation of Grand Sages, its power is even greater. 9 transformation soul herb, easy to say. Even a legendary alchemist probably wouldn't encounter a 9 transformation soul herb more than a few times in his life. Meeting it once or twice would be a lot. A marquis shook his head and said, "An alchemist emperor burying a 9 transformation soul herb with them might be plausible. But a legendary alchemist, absolutely impossible." Such an invaluable treasure, he would rather pass it on to his descendants. 900,000 Saint. Venerable crystal walls. If you are willing to sell, I want it. A true person spoke. Impossible. 500,000 grand sage crystal walls. The auctioneer shook his head. At this moment, an ancient saint mused. 500,000 grand sage crystal walls is also completely impossible. If you are truly sincere about selling 50 grand sage crystal walls. In a short time, the major figures with capital present began to bargain with the auctioneer. After several rounds of back and forth bidding, the auctioneer of the inherited antiquity pavilion finally set the lowest price at 200,000 grand sage crystal walls. 600 grand sage crystal walls. If you are willing to part with it, I'll take it. The final highest bid still came from the Ice Feather Palace successor, Xianxia. This price difference from the price requested by the inherited antiquity pavilion was so unreasonably far apart that the inherited antiquity pavilion was simply unwilling, no matter what. The gap between the buyer's offered price and the auction house's requested price was too wide. After the auction house called out its lowest price, it was no longer willing to lower it. Since that's the case, open the tomb. The Ice Feather Palace successor, Xianxia, said. Everyone dragging on like this is just a waste of time. The inherited antiquity pavilion is so certain about this tomb, there must be something good inside. That's right, open the tomb quickly. If there are good things, everyone will rush to get them. Many buyers present couldn't wait, shouting loudly. Xianxia had been standing beside Li Qiye, keeping a low profile to the point where people could completely overlook him. He opened his mouth and quietly asked Li Qiye, "Brother, what do you think of this tomb?" Li Qiye glanced at him, not answering but asking back. "What do you think of this tomb? I heard you've stolen quite a few tombs, your eyesight should be good." Upon arriving at the scene, although Xianxia was so low-key that people completely ignored him, in fact, his eyes had been constantly darting around. "Brother Dao is joking. I just pick up a little trash. How dare I steal tombs?" Xianxia laughed dryly, but under Li Qiye's steady gaze. He didn't dare to be stubborn and finally said, "This tomb is a bit meager. It's only a legendary alchemist, especially an alchemist from an alchemist family, they wouldn't bury too many valuable things, they would leave them to their descendants. The only bright spot is the ancient herbs. How should I put it, this tomb is a bit unusual. Based on my personal experience traveling underground, this tomb feels a bit gloomy. I see the terrain of this tomb is a burial carrying yang, a bit unconventional. If it's just the tomb of a legendary alchemist, it's not worth hundreds of thousands of grand sage crystal walls, even the lowest grade ones." Although this fellow kept saying he was picking up scraps, deliberately avoiding mentioning tomb raiding, in reality, this fellow was a true professional in that area. Li Qiye looked at Xianxia, smiled, and said nothing. This kid truly had some tricks up his sleeve. Does Brother Dao have any profound insights? Xianxia persisted, still asking. He felt that Li Qiye had a view on this mausoleum. Since arriving, he had been paying attention to the entire valley. We'll know by watching. Li Qiye smiled, not answering Xianxia. However, in his heart, Li Qiye still approved of Xianxia's assessment. This tomb being a burial carrying yang was indeed a little unusual. At the same time, there was one thing Xianxia did not know. It was a very ancient matter. In fact, Li Qiye himself hadn't experienced this, it was only a rumor in that era. And no one had ever known whether this rumor was true or false. Alright, since no buyer has offered a higher price, this mausoleum will be opened right here. Finally, the auctioneer of the inherited antiquity pavilion announced. After receiving confirmation, in front of everyone, the major figures of the inherited antiquity pavilion used astonishing techniques to open the dome of the mausoleum. Immediately, the interior of the mausoleum appeared before everyone's eyes. Everything inside the mausoleum was instantly exposed to the public. At this time, the experts of the inherited antiquity pavilion wrapped the mausoleum. The appraisers of the Inherited Antiquity Pavilion entered the mausoleum and began to inspect the burial items within. Although everyone could see everything in the tomb through the open dome, the mausoleum was enveloped by the experts' divine power. All the buyers outside could not hear the appraisers' evaluations and inspections of each item. Through the open dome, everyone could see an ancient coffin placed in the center of the mausoleum. The coffin was entirely black, seemingly made of gloomy divine wood. Inside the mausoleum, besides the ancient coffin in the center, there were many jars and bottles displayed around. At the same time, there were many medicine shelves inside the mausoleum. Perhaps due to the shelves decaying or some other reason, the medicine shelves had fallen to the ground. Some jars, bottles, and treasure boxes were scattered on the ground, and a few wooden boxes had already decayed. At this moment, the appraisers of the Inherited Antiquity Pavilion were inspecting the burial items inside the mausoleum. Although there were many jars and bottles inside, the skill level of the Inherited Antiquity Pavilion's appraisers was top tier, so the appraisal speed was extremely fast. At this time, all the buyers in the valley held their breath, staring intently at all the burial items in the mausoleum, and also staring at the appraisers, hoping to discern some clues. This was the time to test the buyer's eyesight and skill level. Sometimes, experienced buyers could still snag a bargain. It is indeed an alchemist's mausoleum. Just as everyone speculated, the burial items are all ancient herbs, with no spirit treasures or secret manuals. Seeing that many of the burial items inside the mausoleum were medicine bottles, a buyer murmured. Some buyers with power sighed in relief, saying, "Fortunately, we didn't buy the entire mausoleum. Otherwise, we might have suffered a huge loss." Of course, buyers who came looking for ancient herbs were delighted, hoping to purchase the ancient herbs they needed. Looking at the many jars and bottles in the tomb, everyone was speculating what kind of ancient herbs they were. For a legendary alchemist, his burial items should not be too poor. I hope there are 1 or 2 pieces of peerless immortal medicine. Some people were moved, saying excitedly. Many alchemists, when they die, have a habit of using some spirit medicine and immortal herbs as burial items. Even minor alchemists, before death, will try to find 1 or 2 good spirit medicines or pill herbs for burial. If they don't have 1 or 2 such items to bury, then they have lived their life as a noble alchemist in vain. Good. Now, we begin the tomb auction. We will proceed sequentially, based on the order of inspection, not according to price, the auctioneer said to all the buyers. At this moment, the first medicine bottle was presented. This was an item for which the value could be fully determined. The auctioneer opened the bottle. Immediately, a sour fruity smell wafted out. This fruity smell was slightly fishy, yet interspersed with a faint medicinal fragrance. This trace of medicinal scent instantly made people feel invigorated. This is a bottle of green pill fruit. According to our Inherited Antiquity Pavilion's inspection, this green pill fruit possesses a 700,000-year medicinal spirit. It has been sealed in this bottle for over 1,000,000 years. Everyone knows that a green pill fruit with a 700,000-year medicinal spirit is already quite precious. As a sealed ancient herb, its value needs no further explanation. This bottle of green pill fruit will start at 5,000 ancient Saint crystal walls, which must be of the Grand Saint grade. The auctioneer addressed all the buyers. Crystal walls, even within the same realm, have grade distinctions. For example, crystal walls used exclusively by ancient saints are called ancient saint crystal walls. However, the crystal walls in this realm, the ones with the purest heaven and earth chi, are categorized as Grand Saint crystal walls. It is indeed the green pill fruit. At this moment, everyone stared at the precious fruit inside the bottle. It was slightly different from the green pill fruit normally used to refine longevity medicine. This green pill fruit had been sealed for too long, buried deep underground, and had turned a paste-like color. This was the peculiar effect of ancient herbs, absorbing underground yin chi. I bid 5,000 ancient Saint crystal walls. Immediately, an older generation marquis spoke up. I bid 6,000. Another sect master immediately spoke. Out. Many buyers rushed to bid. Another old imperial lord hurriedly made a bid. 10,000. The green pill fruit is one of the important auxiliary herbs for refining longevity medicine. With a 700,000-year medicinal spirit, it can be used to refine true medicine. Longevity medicine of this grade is highly favored by marquises and true persons, especially those of advanced age. Therefore, this type of longevity medicine is particularly scarce among the older generation of marquises and true persons. As for this green pill fruit being an ancient herb, that goes without saying. For the older generation of marquises and true persons with power and background, they have probably used a lot of ordinary grade longevity medicine. It is possible this is not the first time they have extended their lifespan. For these older generation marquises and true persons, even true medicine-grade longevity medicine has likely induced drug resistance. At that point, consuming a lot of longevity medicine will not extend their lifespan by much. Therefore, older generation marquises and true persons at this level can no longer rely on ordinary longevity medicine. Thus, ancient herbs became their pursuit. Refining longevity medicine using ancient herbs as medicinal ingredients, because they haven't used this type of longevity medicine before, the drug resistance is extremely low, and the effect is great for them. Thus, this green pill fruit, buried for millions of years, became a hot commodity. In the end, this bottle of green pill fruit was sold at an astronomical price, concluding at 80,000 ancient Saint crystal walls, far higher than the starting price of 5,000 crystal walls. Moreover, the people who competed for it were all older generation marquises and true persons. These people were cultivators with limited lifespan remaining, so they were naturally willing to spend money on items that could extend their life. The second auction item is sunken boat wood. The second item brought up was a piece of precious wood. The wood was placed inside a jar. When the jar was opened, a burst of woody fragrance immediately intoxicated the senses and drew exclamations of admiration. The value of sunken boat wood needs no elaboration. The auctioneer said. Every powerful cultivator has a time of destiny calamity. If one carries a piece of sunken boat wood on their person, when the calamity arrives, your true fate will not sink forever, we believe. This piece of sunken boat wood has been buried for millions of years, and the accumulated woody fragrance, after hundreds of thousands of years of sedimentation, is even more mellow. This piece of sunken boat wood starts at 100,000 true person crystal walls. Upon hearing it was sunken boat wood, many people present were stirred, especially young cultivators with very high talent, their hearts pounded even faster. Every cultivator, wishing to ascend to the peak, will inevitably encounter two fatal hurdles. If they cannot overcome these two fatal hurdles, they will perish and turn to ash. These two hurdles are, respectively, the destiny calamity and longevity decline. Among cultivators, there is a saying, destiny calamity is like a heart demon. Longevity decline is like a heavenly drought. The destiny calamity is the tribulation of the true fate. No matter which cultivator it is, at the profound fate grand completion realm, which is the peak of the marquee realm, they must face their destiny calamity. If they cannot break through this true fate tribulation at this realm, they will surely die, and their cultivation path will be ruined. For any cultivator, the destiny calamity is a great tribulation, very difficult to overcome. Once they fail during the destiny calamity tribulation, their lifelong cultivation effort goes down the drain. Therefore, when the sunken boat wood was brought out, it became extremely precious, especially for talented younger generations. Breaking through the marquee realm and achieving the true person realm is only a matter of time for them. Even the older generation marquises who can still become true persons are unwilling to miss out on a piece of sunken boat wood like this. 150,000 true person crystal walls. The first to bid was Sima Longyun, who hailed from the Rage Immortal Holy Nation. As soon as he opened his mouth, he jumped the price by 50,000, looking determined to win 160,000. Although ordinary powerhouses were wary of Sima Longyun, it didn't mean no one dared to compete with him. 170,000. The bidding for the sunken boat wood was mainly led by marquee-level cultivators. After all, if they wanted to become true persons, they would eventually have to face this destiny calamity tribulation. 3,700,000 true-person crystal walls. Finally, the price for this piece of sunken boat would soar to an astronomical height. And the bid was called out by Sima Longyun, the descendant of the Rage Immortal Holy Nation. Bidding over 3 million had deterred many buyers. This price was too ridiculously high. Even if buyers had the power, seeing Sima Longyun's determination to win, they were unwilling to argue with him further. After all, forming a feud with the Rage Immortal Holy Nation was not a wise course of action. The third item for auction is a jar of treasure pearl stone tooth water. Starting at 320,000 soul-nurturing crystal walls. The value of the third burial item was far lower than the two previous items. The fourth item is a bottle of Dew Immortal Cicada exoskeleton, starting at 9,000 marquee crystal walls. One by one, the burial items were brought out. After being inspected by the appraisers of the Inherited Antiquity Pavilion, they were immediately put up for auction. As each item was presented, the vast majority of the burial items were related to spirit medicine and pill herbs. Undeniably, this tomb owner was indeed a legendary alchemist. Only an alchemist would seal so many ancient herbs as burial items. Seeing that most of the burial items were related to ancient herbs, Qi Xiaodao and Qi Xiaodia couldn't help but rejoice. It was possible that the burial items really contained the rotten nether bean they needed. The 45th auction item is a bottle of rotten nether bean. Under the eager anticipation of the Qi siblings, a bottle of rotten nether bean was finally appraised among the tomb's burial items. As the auctioneer opened the bottle, a pungent, decaying smell wafted out. After opening the bottle, it was indeed filled with rotten nether beans. Each rotten nether bean was like a soybean, and each one had turned a paste-like color. When the bottle was opened, Li Qiye couldn't help but twitch his nose, sniffing the scent of the rotten nether bean, subtly savoring it. As soon as the Qi siblings saw this bottle of rotten nether bean, they became excited. This was exactly what they needed. Although the price was likely to be higher than they had imagined, they could still afford it. This bottle of rotten nether bean will start at 4,000 marquee crystal walls, the auctioneer announced. I bid. The auctioneer's words had just ended when Qi Xiaodia couldn't hold back. She immediately raised her hand to bid, but before she could finish her sentence, she was interrupted by Li Qiye, who instantly pulled her back. Qi Xiaodia, pulled by Li Qiye, immediately glared at him, pulling her hand away from his. She said coldly, "What are you doing? We need the rotten nether bean." This scene was noticed by Sima Longyun, who had been paying attention to Qi Xiaodia. He looked at Li Qiye, a cold glint flashing in his eyes, but then spoke gently to Qi Xiaodia. "Esteemed younger sister, do you want the rotten nether bean? How about I procure it for you?" Qi Xiaodia glanced at Sima Longyun and said, "I will buy it myself." After speaking, she wanted to bid, but Li Qiye stopped her again, shaking his head. This act infuriated Sima Longyun internally. He didn't know what kind of relationship Li Qiye had with Qi Xiaodia, but their Rage Immortal Holy Nation had already proposed marriage to the Lion's Roar sect. I bid 5,000. At this moment, someone had already bid for this bottle of rotten nether bean. I bid 10,000. Sima Longyun immediately called out a bid, then said to Qi Xiaodia, "As long as you need it, esteemed younger sister, I will secure it for you." After speaking, he gave a cold laugh, staring intently at Li Qiye. Seeing Sima Longyun's expression, Li Qiye immediately smiled and leisurely called out a bid. I bid 20,000. Li Qiye's demeanor, falling into Sima Longyun's eyes, instantly became a provocation. His gaze sharpened, an unknown youngster dared to provoke him. "What are you doing?" Qi Xiaodia immediately glared at Li Qiye. Although they absolutely needed the rotten nether bean, bidding required skill. Bidding like Li Qiye, simply escalating the price of the rotten nether bean crazily, would ultimately result in their own loss. Li Qiye glanced at Qi Xiaodia, then smiled leisurely and said, "As long as you like it, I'll win it for you. Money is not an issue, as long as you like it." After speaking, he showed an ambiguous smile. Disgusting. Qi Xiaodia, seeing Li Qiye act this way, immediately got goosebumps all over and glared at him. She didn't know what kind of sudden madness Li Qiye had that made him say such words. I bid 30,000. Seeing this exchange, Sima Longyun was immediately enraged. This unknown youngster dared to compete with him for a woman. He was tired of living. Li Qiye slightly lifted an eyelid, but spoke leisurely. I bid 40,000. Qi Xiaodia stared at Li Qiye and couldn't help but say coldly. Are you crazy? They desperately needed the rotten nether bean. But their crystal walls were hard-earned, all gathered by Qi Xiaodao. They couldn't bid like Li Qiye. It's nothing. I lack everything but money. Li Qiye said leisurely. Those who didn't know the situation might think he was trying to flatter Qi Xiaodia. This scene, viewed by others, was particularly eye-catching. Li Qiye appeared to be trying to win the beauty's favor, sparing no expense. While Qi Xiaodia seemed to be worried about her lover's money, looking like she didn't want her beloved to spend too much for her. They looked very affectionate. Especially Sima Longyun. Seeing such a scene, his face immediately darkened, filled with murderous intent. The Rage Immortal Holy Nation had already proposed marriage to the Lion's Roar Nation. This matter was 80 or 90% likely to materialize. Now, an unknown youngster popped out and dared to compete with him for his woman. This guy was seeking death. I bid 50,000. Sima Longyun looked at Li Qiye and said proudly. My Rage Immortal Holy Nation lacks nothing, especially not crystal walls. This was already a challenge directed at Li Qiye. I bid 100,000. Li Qiye didn't even twitch an eyelid, naturally and effortlessly calling out the price. You. Qi Xiaodia was so angry that her entire body trembled, on the verge of exploding. This price had completely surpassed what they were willing to pay. This was simply insane. As for Qi Xiaodao, he couldn't help but force a bitter smile. The situation had escalated to a point where it was out of control. At this moment, Sima Longyun couldn't help but glare at Li Qiye, and Li Qiye smiled leisurely, spreading his hands and saying, I simply don't lack money. Spending 500,000 to make a beauty smile is nothing extraordinary. 200,000. Sima Longyun was immediately filled with towering rage. He came from the Rage Immortal Holy Nation and had always been high and mighty. Who dared to provoke him? Today, in front of the woman he admired, he was being provoked by an unknown youngster. How could he swallow this insult? 500,000. Li Qiye slowly called out the bid. He's crazy, he's absolutely crazy. Hearing Li Qiye's bid, there was an immediate uproar. Even buyers with genuine power were startled by this price. This was completely over 100 times the value of the rotten nether bean. 500,000, 500,000. Is there any higher bid? The auctioneer was excited. As if insane. This was the most thrilling moment of the auction. 10 million. Sima Longyun made a firm decision, looking down on Li Qiye, and said with a cold laugh. I have a lot of money. In reality, 10 million marquee crystal walls for a bottle of rotten nether bean was utterly insane. However, Sima Longyun was committed to the action. Even if he lost money, he couldn't lose face. Especially in front of Qi Xiaodia. At this moment, Li Qiye smiled, slowly spread his hands, then raised a thumb, and laughed. Truly wealthy. 10 million to buy the rotten nether bean. I withdraw. Li Qiye's sudden withdrawal instantly depressed Sima Longyun. It was like winding up for a full-force punch, only to completely miss the target. Even so, Sima Longyun still gave a cold laugh and said proudly. Competing with me? You are far from qualified. 10 million, 10 million. Is there anyone else who will bid higher? The auctioneer shouted loudly, extremely excited. This was probably the highest price for rotten nether bean in his auctioneer life. This price was several hundred times higher, extremely unreasonable. 10 million. This bottle of rotten nether bean goes to young Master Sima of the Rage Immortal Holy Nation. Finally, the auctioneer called out 3 times, with no one else bidding. Sima Longyun became the highest bidder. 10 million. Marquee crystal walls to buy a bottle of rotten nether bean made everyone gasp in cold air. This was truly too unreasonable. Even people who needed the rotten nether bean would not accept this kind of price. In the end, that bottle of rotten nether bean fell into Sima Longyun's hands. What are you going crazy for? Seeing Sima Longyun finally secure the bottle of rotten nether bean, Qi Xiaodia finally couldn't help but explode, shouting coldly at Li Qiye. Originally, they were determined to have the rotten nether bean, but now, due to Li Qiye's interference, it was won by Sima Longyun at an astronomical price. Even if Sima Longyun hadn't won it, this kind of astronomical price was unacceptable to them. At this moment, Qi Xiaodia was furious. This was all Li Qiye's fault. If Li Qiye hadn't suddenly gone mad and bid randomly, they might have bought this bottle of rotten nether bean at a reasonable price. Esteemed younger sister, don't be angry. As long as you need it, this bottle of rotten nether bean is for you. Money is just an external possession, it is nothing. At this moment, Sima Longyun, who had obtained the bottle of rotten nether bean, immediately presented it to Qi Xiaodia. For Sima Longyun, 10 million for a bottle of rotten nether bean was indeed unreasonable. However, if he could gain Qi Xiaodia's favor and ruthlessly strike a blow at Li Qiye, whom he considered a romantic rival, it was enough to satisfy him. At this time, Qi Xiaodia's face was extremely unpleasant. She fundamentally did not want to be involved with Sima Longyun, yet her younger brother desperately needed this bottle of rotten nether bean. You ruined everything. Qi Xiaodia couldn't help but vent her anger at Li Qiye, saying in a deep voice. Li Qiye's expression remained unchanged. He smiled leisurely, looked at Sima Longyun, and said, rotten nether bean has great use. However, a bottle of waste beans is useless. Using a bottle of waste beans to flirt with a beauty, that's too embarrassing. What do you mean? Sima Longyun's face instantly turned cold. Hearing Li Qiye's words, many people present were also surprised. This seemed impossible. Li Qiye smiled leisurely and said, as an alchemist, I'll give you a little common sense. That's right, when rotten nether bean is produced, even when mature, its value is not great. It must be buried for a long time to gain value. It's obvious that the alchemist had a problem when burying it. When drying the rotten nether bean, he must have dried it next to glittering bloodworms. What's the problem with drying rotten nether bean next to glittering bloodworms? Hearing such words, an old cultivator couldn't help but ask. Li Qiye smiled leisurely and said, if you had used the rotten nether bean right away, there would be no problem. However, drying rotten nether bean next to glittering bloodworms caused the rotten nether bean to absorb blood qi. When the rotten nether bean was buried, the blood qi that adhered to it, after being permeated by yin qi for millions of years, corroded the bean heart. This turned the rotten nether bean into waste beans, completely worthless. Is there really such a thing? Hearing Li Qiye's words, the alchemists present were skeptical. They seemed to have never heard of such a thing. Li Qiye said with a cheerful smile. Therefore, when some old alchemists die and want to bury some ancient herbs, they must be careful. Absolutely remember that rotten nether bean must never be dried together with glittering bloodworms. Nonsense. Sima Longyun shouted coldly. This is rotten nether bean appraised by the Inherited Antiquity Pavilion. Li Qiye glanced at him nonchalantly and chuckled. If you don't believe me, you can squeeze one open and see if it's true. Sima Longyun stared at Li Qiye for a moment, then finally snorted coldly and said, I'll squeeze it for you to see. Don't act all mysterious here. With that, he immediately took out a rotten nether bean. However, the moment Sima Longyun squeezed the rotten nether bean, a stream of black liquid immediately oozed out. Once the black liquid flowed out, an unpleasant, foul odor instantly followed. Sima Longyun's expression changed drastically. He squeezed several more rotten nether beans. But every single one was the same, the bean heart had completely corroded. It's really true. This is too miraculous. I've never heard of such common knowledge. Seeing this sight, Many people couldn't help but be astonished. Even the alchemists found it unbelievable, because such common knowledge had never been heard of or recorded. On this point, of course, Li Qiye understood the best. Back then, he and the medicine god tasted 100 herbs and tested 10,000 medicines. What kind of medicine had he not tried? In terms of pharmacology, was there anyone alive at that time who understood it better than him? What's more, he possessed the unparalleled medicine god Grand Codex. The moment Li Qiye carefully sniffed the medicinal smell of this rotten nether bean, he knew that the bottle of rotten nether bean had a problem. Since Sima Longyun provoked him, he simply took the opportunity to trick Sima Longyun, letting him pay an exorbitant price for a bottle of waste beans. Seeing this scene, Qi Xiaodia couldn't help but be stunned, speechless for a long time. At this moment, she finally understood why Li Qiye had bid an astronomical price. In that instant, she was moved. If she had been intent on buying that bottle of rotten nether bean, she definitely would have bought a bottle of waste beans. Bringing a bottle of waste beans to impress a beauty, that eyesight is simply too poor. Li Qiye looked at Sima Longyun's ashen face and said with a leisurely smile, "Truly spectacular. What a piece of alchemist. Common sense. Today, it finally opens one's eyes." Bing Yuxia, the successor of the Ice Feather Palace, sitting in the pavilion, also clapped her hands and cheered. "What is going on?" Sima Longyun's face became unbearably dark. He questioned the auctioneer angrily. "Is it possible that your inherited antiquity pavilion is trying to auction off such waste beans to deceive people?" The auctioneer's expression was composed. He said, "Young Master Sima, please calm down. The rules of tomb auctioning are clear to everyone in the Eastern 100 cities. The risk is shared between the auction house and the buyer. This auction, from the opening of the tomb until now, has been conducted in full view of everyone. The entire process has been witnessed by all present, and the inherited antiquity pavilion has not played any tricks. As for the problem with the burial item, we can only say that our appraiser made a mistake. Just like someone snagging a bargain, do they have to compensate our inherited antiquity pavilion for the remaining value? This is something everyone clearly knows in their hearts. Our inherited antiquity pavilion is a long-standing establishment and can solemnly promise that if an item is auctioned in an auction hall and has a problem, we will compensate 10 times the price. However, everyone understands the rules of a tomb auction, on-site inspection, on-site auction, risks are shared. Whether the problem with the burial item is a buyer snagging a bargain, or our misjudgment, it is within the reasonable scope. What you see, you buy. There is no trickery from our inherited antiquity pavilion, so the responsibility does not lie with us. The auctioneer handled the situation with ease. This was not the first time he had dealt with such an issue. Encountering such a problem in a tomb auction, one can only consider themselves unlucky. If it were an auction house sale, there would be a guarantee, but the starting price would be much higher. Some cultivators also nodded in agreement. The rules of tomb auctioning were very clear to all cultivators in the Eastern 100 cities. If such a thing happened, it didn't mean the inherited antiquity pavilion was deceiving people, and the responsibility certainly did not lie with the inherited antiquity pavilion. Sima Longyun's face was ashen. He had spent 10 million marquee crystal walls to win that bottle of rotten nether bean, originally intending to win the beauty's favor. Unexpectedly, it turned out to be a waste of money, 10 million for a bottle of waste beans. The money lost wasn't the biggest problem, the biggest problem was that he had completely lost face. 10 million for a bottle of waste beans, no matter how you looked at it, was a squandering of wealth. Such an incident was simply a laughing stock, so how could it not turn his face green with anger? At this moment, Qi Xiaodia's anger from earlier also subsided into silence. If it hadn't been for Li Qiye's interference, she would probably have paid a high price for that bottle of rotten nether bean. That bottle of waste beans. Girls who don't understand things shouldn't talk carelessly, lest they spoil the matter. At this moment, Li Qiye glared at Qi Xiaodia and said leisurely. Qi Xiaodia immediately felt miserable, filled with pent-up frustration and anger, but she could only hide it in her heart. She glared at Li Qiye hatefully, extremely depressed. Next auction. Item. After such a commotion, the tomb auction continued. Although everyone was lively, they didn't hesitate to bid due to the rotten netherbean incident. In quick succession, over a dozen burial items were auctioned off, all of them precious ancient herbs. As each item was brought out, the burial items inside the mausoleum became fewer and fewer. Qi Xiaodao couldn't help but force a bitter smile. There was no rotten netherbean left among the burial items. Towards the end of the auction, only a few items remained, which even the appraisers of the Inherited Antiquity Pavilion found difficult to assess. The next burial item will be auctioned at the cheapest price, the auctioneer said. At this moment, a wooden box was presented. This wooden box was completely decayed, and a lot of rotten mud adhered to it. There was no need to look, the wooden box was useless. Even if it still contained ancient herbs, they had probably decayed away. If it weren't for the rotten mud holding it together, this completely decayed wooden box would have long since fallen apart. This burial item is a rotten box. According to our appraiser's inspection, there is a medicinal smell inside, which might be a precious spirit medicine. Our Inherited Antiquity Pavilion will not open the wooden box to retrieve the medicine. This ancient herb box starts at 300 marquis crystal walls, the auctioneer said. What a joke! Upon hearing the auctioneer's words, the buyers present immediately made a ruckus. A buyer said, "This ancient herb box clearly looks rotten. To still ask for 300 marquis crystal walls is simply extortion," the auctioneer said. Our appraiser has inspected it. It definitely contained precious spirit medicine. The medicinal smell inside has a rare fragrance and is extremely pure. It is a very rare spirit medicine. At this moment, Li Qiye also carefully sniffed the wooden box that had turned into mush, smelling the medicinal scent within. Even if the ancient herb was precious, it's worthless now. Looking at this wooden box, you can tell it has decayed into mud. Any ancient herb would have rotted away. I think at most, the price should be 100 heaven origin crystal walls for everyone to take a gamble and see if there are any remaining medicinal residues in this mush. An alchemist couldn't help but say. 300 marquis crystal walls is the lowest price. If no one bids, our Inherited Antiquity Pavilion will have to take it back. The auctioneer insisted on this bottom line, addressing all the buyers. The auctioneer's insistence was because the appraisers of the Inherited Antiquity Pavilion believed that an extraordinary ancient herb had once been sealed inside. But unfortunately, it hadn't been preserved well and had decayed away. 300 marquis crystal walls, starting price. At this moment, the auctioneer struck the gavel once. No one bid. He struck it a second time. Still, no one bid. This has all turned into medicinal residue. 300 marquis crystal walls is completely not worth it. An alchemist shook his head and said. Even for the buyers present, 300 marquis crystal walls was not an astronomical price, but buying a lump of mud was completely unprofitable. 300 marquis crystal walls. Third call. As the final gavel strike approached, the auctioneer shouted loudly. 300 marquis crystal walls, I want it. At the crucial moment, Li Qiye spoke out. At this moment, many people looked at Li Qiye. 300 marquis crystal walls to buy a lump of mud, this was simply having too much money with nowhere to spend it. Someone shook their head and said. This young fellow really dares to gamble. 300 marquis crystal walls, is there any other bidder? The auctioneer shouted, but the buyers present were not very interested in that lump of mud. Finally, this lump of mud was won by Li Qiye for 300 marquis crystal walls. When Li Qiye obtained this lump of mud, Sima Longyun sneered and said contemptuously. That's good. Buy a lump of mud to take back. At least it lets people know you've been out in society and participated in a tomb auction. 300 marquis crystal walls to buy a little vanity, for a poor youngster, that's still considered a bargain. After Li Qiye bought this item, he originally intended to put it away, but Sima Longyun stepped right on his head again. He smiled, glanced at Sima Longyun, and said. An idiot like you wouldn't know what an ancient herb is. Only an idiot like you would spend 10 million to buy a bottle of waste beans. Upon mentioning this embarrassing matter, Sima Longyun's face immediately turned ashen. He finally said coldly, 10 million. I spent it freely, young master. At least it's much better than a poor wretch spending 300 crystal walls to buy a lump of mud to save face. Lump of mud. Li Qiye looked at Sima Longyun leisurely, and said with a smile. Only a fool would think this is a lump of mud. Let a few fools witness what a true ancient herb is. With that, he gently pushed apart the lump of rotten mud that had decayed and stuck together. When this lump of mud was separated, rotten nether beans rolled out one by one. Each rotten nether bean was large, and a faint golden color showed through the paste-like color. As the rotten nether beans rolled out, an invigorating medicinal fragrance wafted out, making everyone who smelled it feel completely refreshed and comfortable. Rotten nether bean. As soon as they saw these rotten nether beans roll out, the buyers present were immediately stirred. An old alchemist's expression trembled, and he choked out. This is supreme-grade rotten nether bean. The paste color has turned gold. Rotten nether beans like this are worth over 10,000 marquee crystal walls each on the market. This is the supreme grade of supreme grades. Supreme-grade rotten nether bean with a million-year medicinal spirit. At this moment, even an ancient herb appraiser from the Inherited Antiquity Pavilion couldn't sit still. He immediately walked out, looking at the bottle of rotten nether beans Li Qiye had collected. And he was dumbfounded. This time, all the buyers present couldn't help but be moved. An alchemist muttered. How is this possible? Given this level of decay, even other ancient herbs would have rotted away. Not only did this rotten nether bean not rot, but its medicinal properties are even purer. Could this be something the legendary alchemist intentionally did during the burial? I should have acted. This full bottle of rotten nether bean is probably worth over 1 million marquee crystal walls on the market. This kind of supreme-grade rotten nether bean is definitely a hot commodity. A powerful ancient saint with abundant financial resources couldn't help but stamp his foot in regret. Seeing the full bottle of supreme-grade rotten nether bean, Qi Xiaodao couldn't help but be excited and thrilled. He needed the rotten nether bean, and he didn't expect Li Qiye to secure a full bottle of supreme-grade rotten nether bean on his first try, and at a much lower price. This was truly unbelievable. Qi Xiaodao also found it unbelievable. She stared at Li Qiye. At this moment, she no longer felt that Li Qiye's success was mere luck. Now, she felt that the young devil she considered a swindler was becoming more and more unfathomable, becoming even more mysterious. Fellow Taoist, what is the principle behind this? At this moment, the ancient herb appraiser from the Inherited Antiquity Pavilion hurriedly stepped forward, bowing to Li Qiye. Even he found the matter impossible, yet the ancient box was completely decayed, while the rotten nether bean was even more supreme grade. There must be an unknown pharmacological principle at work here. This is another piece of common knowledge, but unfortunately, I cannot tell you. Li Qiye said with a smile. The appraiser could only sigh softly. It was normal for someone not to share information. He still bowed respectfully and said no more. How is it? How does my buying mud for 300 crystal walls compare to your buying waste beans for 10 million? Li Qiye glanced at Sima Longyun and said casually. If others dared to step on his head, he would absolutely not hold back on giving them a slap, and would not save the other party any face. Sima Longyun's face immediately turned ashen, ugly to the extreme. Today, he had suffered 2 setbacks. First, paying an astronomical price for waste beans. When Li Qiye bought the lump of mud, he originally wanted to mock and taunt him, but unexpectedly, he was slapped hard by Li Qiye instead. Thank you for listening to the story on KTN Storyverse. Please like and subscribe to support the channel.